Rachel stood in the doorway of her in-laws' dining room, frozen. Her daughters, Mia and Sophie, sat cross-legged on the hardwood floor near the kitchen, nibbling crackers from paper napkins. At the mahogany table, her sister-in-law Bethany's sons ate second helpings of pot roast, their plates full and steaming. "Oh, Rachel," her mother-in-law Diane said without looking up. "I didn't hear you come in." Rachel's eyes moved from her daughters to the lavish spread on the table. Mashed potatoes, glazed carrots, fresh rolls, and her girls, 9 and 7 years old, eating crackers like it was a snack, not dinner. "Girls ready to go?" Rachel asked, her voice carefully neutral. "We ate already, Mom," Mia said quietly. The resignation in her daughter's voice sent ice through Rachel's veins. Bethany glanced up from her phone. "They said they weren't hungry for heavy food. Kids, you know how they are." Rachel looked at Sophie, who always ate everything. Tyler, Bethany's eldest, was reaching for his third roll. The math didn't add up. "Actually," Rachel said, moving toward the kitchen, "I think I'll make them proper plates before we leave." "There's really no need," Diane started. "There's plenty left," Rachel interrupted, already pulling containers from the fridge. She loaded 2 plates with generous portions and set them on the counter for her daughters. As Mia and Sophie ate with unmistakable hunger, Rachel watched the room. Her father-in-law Kenneth sat in his recliner, absorbed in the television. Bethany scrolled through her phone. Diane busied herself with clearing dishes. No one met Rachel's eyes. The drive home felt longer than usual. Both girls stared out their windows, silent in that particular way children are when they're processing something painful. "Did you have fun today?" Rachel asked, though she dreaded the answer. "It was okay," Mia said. "The boys played video games," Sophie added. "Upstairs. Did you play too?" Silence. "Those games are for older kids," Mia finally said, repeating words that clearly weren't her own. Rachel gripped the steering wheel tighter. Her daughters weren't that much younger. And Sophie was actually more coordinated with controllers than most kids her age. At home, her husband David was grading papers at the kitchen table. He looked up as they entered, and his expression changed immediately. "What happened?" "We need to talk," Rachel said, nodding toward the girls. "After bedtime." But Sophie, with the brutal honesty of a 7-year-old, walked straight to her father. "Dad, we had to eat on the floor while the cousins ate at the table." David's pen stopped mid-stroke. His dark eyes found Rachel's, and she saw years of carefully hidden hurt surface in an instant. "Tell me exactly what happened," he said. After the girls were asleep, Rachel and David sat on their back porch, the night air heavy with unsaid things finally demanding voice. "How long have you known?" Rachel asked. David was quiet for a long moment. "Known what? That your family treats me like a guest in their home after 10 years of marriage? That they ask me questions about my background like I'm an anthropological study? Or that our daughters are never quite included the way their cousins are?" Each word hit like a stone. "Why didn't you tell me?" "I tried, Rachel." Gently. "You always had explanations. Your mom's just particular about her house. Bethany's boys are older, they have different interests. Kenneth's from a different generation." David's voice wasn't angry, just tired. "You wanted to believe the best of them. I didn't want to make you choose." Rachel thought about 10 years of family gatherings, seeing them now through a different lens. The way conversation often stopped when David entered rooms. How her parents asked intrusive questions about his tenure track position, his research, his family history, questions that felt like tests he had to pass over and over. The comments about the girls' hair, their skin tone, whether they'd fit in at certain schools. "I should have seen it," she whispered. "You saw what you needed to see to keep your family intact." David took her hand. "But Rachel, our daughters are old enough now to understand when they're being treated as less than. We can't protect them from the world, but we shouldn't have to protect them from their own grandparents." Rachel pulled out her laptop, suddenly needing to understand something else that had been nagging at her. She opened their banking app and started scrolling through years of transactions. The pattern was impossible to miss once she looked for it. Transfers to her parents' account. Payments to Bethany. Loans that were never repaid. Emergency assistance that became routine. "David, look at this." As the numbers accumulated on screen, David let out a long breath. $53,000. In 3 years. More, if I go back further. Rachel clicked through older statements. The requests had started small when she first got her teaching position. $20 here, $50 there. But as she completed her master's degree and moved into administration, as David's professor salary added to their household income, the requests had grown exponentially. New roof, medical bills, car repairs, always presented as temporary emergencies. Always promised to be paid back. Never repaid. When did we last ask them for help with anything? Rachel asked aloud. David didn't answer, but they both knew. When Rachel's appendix burst 2 years ago, her parents were too busy to help with the girls. When David's father died and he needed to fly across the country, Rachel's family couldn't watch the children for the weekend. When they moved to their current house, not one family member showed up to help despite 3 weeks' notice. But when Kenneth needed dental work, Rachel had wired $2,000 within hours. They've been using us, Rachel said slowly. Using me. They've been using your guilt, David corrected. Your desire to be the good daughter. Your success. Rachel closed the laptop. Something hard and clear was forming in her chest. I need to know if it's just about money or if there's more. What do you mean? I mean I need to hear what they say when they think I'm not listening. 2 days later, Rachel called her mother and apologized. For overreacting. For being sensitive. For making drama out of nothing. Diane's relief was audible. I knew you'd understand, sweetie. You're always so reasonable. I'd like to come by tomorrow, Rachel said. Talk things through properly. That would be wonderful. Bethany will be here too. We can all clear the air. The next afternoon, Rachel parked down the street from her parents' house. She let herself in through the back door, the way she had hundreds of times growing up, and moved quietly through the mudroom. Voices carried from the kitchen. Her mother, her father, Bethany. I can't believe she made such a scene, Bethany was saying. Like we're monsters for being realistic about social situations. The girls need to understand how things work, Kenneth replied. Better they learn it from us than get blindsided later. Rachel pressed herself against the hallway wall, her heart pounding. Exactly, Diane agreed. Rachel's always been idealistic. She thinks everyone will just accept a mixed family, but that's not reality. Some situations are complicated. My boys' friends from the country club were at that pool party, Bethany said. I couldn't have them asking awkward questions about why Mia and Sophie look so different. It puts us in uncomfortable positions. The neighbors already talk, Diane sighed. They asked questions. Whether Rachel knew what she was getting into. Whether those girls will have problems as they get older. Identity issues, that sort of thing. Rachel's hands clenched into fists. Well, Kenneth said, at least we don't have to worry about Rachel staying upset long term. She always comes back when we need her. Especially financially. She's too soft-hearted, Diane agreed. Remember when she was upset about that car loan for Bethany? She got over it and ended up paying the insurance too. Rachel's our safety net, Bethany laughed. She might pout for a week, but she'll be back with her checkbook. Then Diane said the words that would echo in Rachel's mind forever. The thing is, Bethany's children come first and mine get whatever's left. That's just how it has to be with mixed families. The normal-looking children get priority. Right, Bethany agreed casually. And honestly, the sooner Mia and Sophie understand their place, the better. They were born into a complicated situation. It's just reality. They need to learn where they fit, Kenneth added. We're doing them a favor by teaching them early. Rachel walked into the kitchen. 3 faces turned toward her, guilt flashing before practiced masks slipped into place. Rachel, Diane said brightly, you're early. We were just talking about how much we enjoyed having the girls. The audacity stole Rachel's breath. After hearing them casually discuss her daughter's inferior status, her mother was performing Grandmother of the Year. Were you? Rachel said flatly. Yes, they're such sweet girls. So well-mannered. Rachel looked at each of them in turn. I heard your conversation. Every word. The color drained from their faces. What conversation? Diane asked weakly. The one where you explained that mixed children should get whatever's left after the normal-looking children are taken care of. Silence crashed through the kitchen. The one where you said my daughters need to learn their place. Rachel, you're taking things out of context, Kenneth started. Am I? What context makes it acceptable to say that my 7- and 9-year-old daughters deserve less than their cousins because their father is black? We never said, Bethany began. You said it exactly. I heard every word. Rachel's voice remained steady despite the rage coursing through her. But what really struck me was the part about me being your safety net. Your reliable ATM who always comes back with her checkbook. They exchanged glances, clearly calculating their next move. We're family, Kenneth said carefully. Family helps each other. You're absolutely right. Family does help each other. But they also protect each other's children. They don't teach those children to accept discrimination from their own relatives. Rachel walked toward the door, then turned back. I'm going to give you time to think about what you said. About whether you can live with treating my children as less worthy than Bethany's. About whether your financial comfort is worth more than your granddaughter's well-being. Rachel, wait, Diane called. We'll talk again when you're ready to be honest about whether you want my children in your lives or just my money. Rachel spent the weekend in a state of cold clarity. While David took the girls to the park, she sat at their kitchen table with 8 years of financial records spread before her. Her accountant called Monday afternoon. Rachel, I've finished the analysis you requested. The total documented financial support over 8 years is $134,000. That doesn't include gifts, informal assistance, or items you paid for directly. The number was staggering. That was their daughter's college fund. The addition they'd been planning for their house. The sabbatical year David had been dreaming about to finish his book. What would you recommend? Immediate cessation of all support. You're subsidizing other adults' lifestyles at significant cost to your own family's financial security. Next, Rachel called the family attorney her principal had recommended. Do I have any legal obligation to continue financial support I've been providing? Are these court-ordered obligations? Elderly parents requiring care? No. Voluntary support that's become expected. Then you have zero legal obligation to continue. Any money you've given was your choice. Stopping is equally your choice. That evening, Rachel and David had the conversation that would change everything. I want to cut off all financial support, she said. Immediately. All of it. David studied her face. Are you sure? They're going to react badly. If strangers treated our daughters the way my family treats them, what would you want me to do? Cut contact immediately. Then why should relatives get different treatment? Over the next 2 days, Rachel systematically dismantled the financial safety net she'd unknowingly created. She called the mortgage company where she was a co-signer on her parents' loan. I need to understand my options for removing myself from this mortgage. You'd need the other borrowers to qualify for refinancing without your income, or they'd need to find another qualified co-signer. And if they can't, they'd need to sell the property to pay off the balance. Rachel gave them 60 days notice of her intent to withdraw. She canceled all automatic transfers to her parents' accounts. The mortgage assistance, emergency fund contributions, insurance payments, all stopped. She contacted Bethany's auto lender. I want to be removed as a co-signer on this loan. By Wednesday evening, she'd extracted herself from their financial ecosystem while giving them enough time to make alternative arrangements. Then she waited. The first call came Thursday evening. Kenneth's voice was carefully controlled. Rachel, there seems to be a banking error. Our mortgage assistance didn't transfer. There's no error, Dad. I don't understand. I canceled the automatic transfer. Silence. Then, why would you do that? Because I'm no longer comfortable subsidizing people who think my children deserve less than their cousins. Rachel, if this is about that conversation where mom said mixed children should get leftovers while normal-looking children get priority. Where you agreed my daughters need to learn their place. More silence. We can work something out, he said finally. What's to discuss? Either you think my daughters are worthy of the same love and respect as Bethany's sons, or you don't. Of course we do. Then prove it. Start treating them that way. Rachel, you're being unreasonable. I'm being a mother. The mortgage help stops. The emergency fund stops. All of it stops until you figure out how to be proper grandparents to all your grandchildren. 20 minutes later, Bethany called. Rachel, what the hell? Dad just called me panicking about the mortgage. I canceled my financial support. You can't do that. They depend on that money. Then they shouldn't have spent an hour discussing how my children are social liabilities who need to learn their place. That's not, we didn't mean, Bethany sputtered. Look, maybe we could have phrased things better, but you can't destroy mom and dad's financial security over a misunderstanding. I'm not destroying anything. I'm stopping my subsidization of people who think my husband was a mistake and my children are problems. We never said that. You said my children were born to get leftovers. You said normal-looking children get priority. You said they need to learn their place. Which part am I misremembering? Silence. Here's what's going to happen, Rachel continued. You have 60 days to figure out how to live on your actual incomes. If you can convince me that you genuinely want my children in your lives, not my money, but my children, then we can rebuild a relationship. Rachel, please. I've been trying to work things out for 8 years, and my daughters are still eating on the floor while their cousins eat at the table. Over the following weeks, Rachel watched her family reveal their true priorities. Diane called crying. They'd structured their entire budget around Rachel's assistance. How could they possibly manage without it? Maybe you need to downsize to a home you can actually afford, Rachel suggested. You're being vindictive and cruel. Bethany alternated between anger and desperation. Her car payment was $360 monthly, nearly a quarter of her boutique salary. You're going to ruin my credit score. Kenneth tried a different approach, showing up at Rachel's house unannounced. We need to talk about this reasonably. I'm happy to talk about when you plan to start treating my daughters with the same consideration you show Bethany's sons. We do treat them the same. Dad, you literally said they need to learn their place because they're mixed race. He struggled for an answer and couldn't find one that didn't sound exactly like what it was. Look, he said finally, maybe we've been insensitive. But destroying our financial stability isn't the answer. I'm not destroying anything. I'm stopping my participation in funding people who don't respect my family. If we make changes, will the financial support come back? The fact that his first concern was money told Rachel everything she needed to know. By week 4, the desperation had intensified. Her parents listed their house. Bethany took a second job. The comfortable lifestyle Rachel had unknowingly funded was crumbling. That's when they tried a new strategy. Diane called with a proposal. Rachel, we've been thinking. What if we set up regular family dinners where everyone is treated equally? What would that look like? Every Sunday, all the grandchildren come over. Same activities, same dinner for everyone. It sounded promising until Diane continued, and maybe while we're rebuilding trust, you could help with essential expenses. Just the mortgage, so we don't lose the house. There it was, the performance of change in exchange for continued financial support. Mom, when someone shows you who they are, believe them. You showed me that you think my children deserve less than their cousins. Everything since then has been you trying to minimize that reality so you can keep my money. That's not true, isn't it? You're not calling because you miss Mia and Sophie. You're calling because you miss my financial contributions. We miss all of you. Then prove it. Spend time with my children without asking for money. Show genuine interest in their lives without negotiating for financial support. The call ended with Diane crying and Rachel feeling nothing but a cold certainty that she'd made the right choice. David found her sitting on their back porch afterward, staring at the sunset. How are you holding up? He asked, settling beside her. I keep waiting to feel guilty. To feel like I'm being too harsh. And? Nothing. I just feel clear. Is that terrible? David put his arm around her. It's not terrible. You're protecting our family. They're going to lose the house. They might. But that's the consequence of their choices, not yours. You didn't create this situation. They did. Rachel leaned into him. Mia asked me yesterday why we don't see Grandma and Grandpa anymore. What did you tell her? That sometimes people need time to figure out how to be the best versions of themselves. That we're giving them space to do that. And, she said, does that mean they weren't being their best versions when we ate on the floor? David exhaled slowly. Smart kid. Too smart. They both understand more than I wish they did. Better they understand the truth and learn to accept being treated as less than. 2 months after Rachel cut off financial support, her parents lost their house. They moved into a small 2-bedroom apartment across town. Bethany sold her car and bought a used sedan she could afford on her combined salaries from 2 jobs. Rachel watched from a distance, keeping tabs through mutual acquaintances but maintaining her boundary. She wouldn't relent just because the consequences were uncomfortable. Then, 3 months after their last conversation, David came home from work with an unexpected message. Your dad wants to meet with me. Just the 2 of us. Says he wants to talk. Rachel looked up from helping Sophie with homework. About what? He didn't say, just asked if I'd be willing to meet for coffee. What do you think? David considered. I think it's worth hearing what he has to say. David met Kenneth at a coffee shop halfway between their homes. When he came back 2 hours later, his expression was complicated. How did it go? Rachel asked. He apologized. Actually apologized, not the sorry you were offended kind. The real kind. Rachel set down her book. For what specifically? For treating me like I didn't belong in the family. For making assumptions about our daughters based on race. For participating in conversations about whether they should be included in family activities. David paused. For everything, really. Do you believe him? I think he's scared. They've lost a lot, Rachel. The house, their financial security, their comfortable life. But I also think he's genuinely reflecting. He asked about Mia's robotics club. He wanted to know about Sophie's dance recital. He seemed different. Rachel wanted to feel vindicated, but instead she felt cautious. One conversation doesn't undo years of behavior. I know. He said the same thing. Said he doesn't expect immediate forgiveness, but wanted me to know they're working on things. Working on things how? They're in family counseling. Actually paying for it themselves from their reduced income. Diane, Kenneth, and Bethany. They're learning about unconscious bias and how their behavior affected you and the girls. That evening, Diane called. Rachel, I know you probably don't want to hear from me, Rachel didn't respond, just waited. I wanted you to know we're in counseling. All three of us. We're trying to understand how we got to this point, how we let our prejudices hurt people we love. Okay, Rachel said neutrally. I don't expect you to forgive us immediately. But I wanted you to know we're working on becoming the kind of grandparents Mia and Sophie deserve. What does that look like? It looks like admitting we were wrong. About the pool parties, about the separate dinners, about all of it. It looks like confronting our own biases instead of expecting children to accommodate them. For the first time, Diane sounded genuine rather than strategic. Mom, I need you to understand something. The money is never coming back. Regardless of what changes you make, I will never again subsidize this family financially. I understand. Do you? Because every previous conversation has eventually turned into a request for assistance. We have to learn to live within our means. That's our responsibility, not yours. It was the first time Rachel had heard her mother acknowledge that. If you want a relationship with Mia and Sophie, it has to be because you value them. Not because you're hoping to restore financial support. I do value them. I know it doesn't look that way, but I do. Then show them. Not me. Them. Over the next several months, small changes began to appear. Kenneth sent Mia an article about a robotics competition he thought she'd find interesting. Diane asked Rachel if she could attend Sophie's dance recital. Bethany texted David a picture of a book about mixed-race identity, asking if he thought it would be appropriate to read with all the children together. Each gesture was small, tentative, but they kept coming. 6 months after Rachel cut off financial support, they had their first family dinner. Not at her parents' apartment, they didn't have space. At a casual restaurant where everyone paid for their own meals. Rachel watched carefully as her parents interacted with all 4 grandchildren. Kenneth asked Mia detailed questions about her robotics project and actually listened to her enthusiastic explanation. Diane cheered when Sophie demonstrated a new dance move between tables. They included both girls equally in conversations, games, and attention. It wasn't perfect. Decades of ingrained behavior didn't disappear overnight. But it was different. Genuinely different. Bethany's boys seemed confused at first by the new dynamics, but they adapted. Tyler asked Mia to explain how her robot worked. Connor taught Sophie a card game. The cousins were actually acting like cousins. After dinner, while David took the kids to look at desserts, Diane pulled Rachel aside. I want you to know that losing your financial support was the best thing that could have happened to us. Rachel raised her eyebrows. How do you figure? Because it forced us to examine why we were willing to risk losing you and the girls. It made us realize we'd been prioritizing comfort over family. Money over love. Rachel studied her mother's face, searching for manipulation. Instead, she saw genuine remorse. The girls still ask why they don't see you more often, Rachel said carefully. Maybe we could change that. Not big family events. Small visits. Getting to know them as individuals. We'd like that very much. As they drove home that night, Sophie asked the question Rachel had been both dreading and hoping for. Mom, are Grandma and Grandpa different now? What do you think, sweetheart? I think they're trying to be different. Grandpa asked me about my dance recital like he really wanted to know, not like he was just being polite. Mia nodded. And Grandma actually understood what I was saying about the robot's programming. She asked smart questions. David reached over and squeezed Rachel's hand. Any regrets? Rachel thought about the house her parents lost, the financial stress her decisions caused, the months of estrangement. Then she thought about her daughters, who were learning they didn't have to accept less than full respect from anyone, including family. None, she said, not a single one. 6 months after Rachel cut off financial support, they had their first family dinner. Not at her parents' apartment, they didn't have space. At a casual restaurant where everyone paid for their own meals. Rachel watched carefully as her parents interacted with all 4 grandchildren. Kenneth asked Mia detailed questions about her robotics project and actually listened to her enthusiastic explanation. Diane cheered when Sophie demonstrated a new dance move between tables. They included both girls equally in conversations, games, and attention. It wasn't perfect. Decades of ingrained behavior didn't disappear overnight. But it was different. Genuinely different. Bethany's boys seemed confused at first by the new dynamics, but they adapted. Tyler asked Mia to explain how her robot worked. Connor taught Sophie a card game. The cousins were actually acting like cousins. After dinner, while David took the kids to look at desserts, Diane pulled Rachel aside. I want you to know that losing your financial support was the best thing that could have happened to us. Rachel raised her eyebrows. How do you figure? Because it forced us to examine why we were willing to risk losing you and the girls. It made us realize we'd been prioritizing comfort over family. Money over love. Rachel studied her mother's face, searching for manipulation. Instead, she saw genuine remorse. The girls still ask why they don't see you more often, Rachel said carefully. Maybe we could change that. Not big family events. Small visits. Getting to know them as individuals. We'd like that very much. As they drove home that night, Sophie asked the question Rachel had been both dreading and hoping for. Mom, are Grandma and Grandpa different now? What do you think, sweetheart? I think they're trying to be different. Grandpa asked me about my dance recital like he really wanted to know, not like he was just being polite. Mia nodded. And Grandma actually understood what I was saying about the robot's programming. She asked smart questions. David reached over and squeezed Rachel's hand. Any regrets? Rachel thought about the house her parents lost, the financial stress her decisions caused, the months of estrangement. Then she thought about her daughters, who were learning they didn't have to accept less than full respect from anyone, including family. None, she said, not a single one. Rachel's decision to cut off financial support had consequences beyond her immediate family. Other relatives who'd occasionally benefited from her generosity had to reassess their own situations. Her cousin Emma called one evening. I heard what happened with your parents. And I wanted to apologize. For what? For never questioning why you were always the one helping everyone. For accepting your money without ever offering support in return. For being part of the pattern. These conversations happened multiple times, family members acknowledging they'd taken Rachel's generosity for granted, that they'd let her carry burdens that should have been shared or not placed on her at all. At a family reunion Rachel almost didn't attend, her Uncle Mark stood up during dinner and said something that shocked everyone into silence. I want to acknowledge Rachel for teaching this family something we needed to learn. That love isn't measured by financial support. That inclusion means actually including everyone, not just people who look like we expect them to. That family should be a safe place for all our children, not a hierarchy based on whose kids fit better into our social circles. The room was quiet. Then someone started clapping. Others joined. Rachel felt David take her hand under the table while Mia and Sophie beamed at her from across the room. Diane stood up, tears in her eyes. I want to add something. Rachel, you saved this family by refusing to enable our worst instincts. You loved your daughters more than you loved our approval, and that's what real parenting looks like. I'm sorry it took me so long to understand that. Kenneth added his voice. And Rachel, you loved us enough to let us face the consequences of our choices. That wasn't cruel. It was honest. And it gave us the chance to become better people. Later, as they drove home, Sophie said, Mom, why was everyone clapping for you at dinner? Rachel thought about how to explain it. Sometimes loving people means being honest with them even when it's hard. Even when they don't like it at first. Like when you told Grandma and Grandpa they couldn't keep treating us different from the cousins. Exactly like that. I'm glad you did that, Mia said. Things are better now. Rachel looked at David, who nodded. Things were better. Not perfect, healing generational patterns took time, but genuinely better. That fall, Mia joined a robotics team that competed nationally. The whole family came to watch her compete, grandparents, aunt, cousins, all wearing matching team shirts that Diane had ordered for everyone. When Mia's team won second place, Kenneth was the loudest cheering. Afterward, he hugged his granddaughter tight and said, I'm so proud of you. Not just for this, but for who you are. Sophie's dance recital that December had a similar family showing. Diane cried through the entire performance, then bought flowers for her granddaughter and a dozen other dancers, telling anyone who'd listen, that's my granddaughter. Isn't she remarkable? Bethany's sons asked if Mia and Sophie could sleep over for New Year's Eve, and Bethany made a point of including Rachel's family in all their holiday traditions. It's like having real family again, David said one evening as they decorated their Christmas tree. Like belonging. It's like having family that actually wants us, Rachel corrected. That's the difference. 2 years after the confrontation that changed everything, Rachel attended a financial planning workshop at work. The presenter talked about the bank of mom and dad phenomenon, adult children depending on parental support well into their 30s and 40s. During the Q&A, someone asked, but what if your parents are the ones depending on you? How do you set boundaries there? Rachel found herself raising her hand. I can speak to that. She told a version of her story, leaving out identifying details but including the core truth. That she'd been financially supporting family members who simultaneously excluded her children. That stopping that support had been the hardest and best decision she'd made. The thing I learned, she said, is that you can't buy respect or inclusion. If someone only values your money but not your children, not your spouse, not you as a full person, that's not a relationship worth funding. After the workshop, 3 different people approached her privately. Each had similar stories, supporting family members who didn't fully respect them, funding lifestyles while sacrificing their own family's security, feeling trapped by obligation and guilt. "What gave you the courage to stop?" one woman asked. "Hearing my children's voices when they talked about being treated differently," Rachel answered. "Realizing I was teaching them to accept less than they deserved by accepting it myself." The conversation inspired Rachel to start a blog about financial boundaries and family dynamics. She wrote about the intersection of financial support and respect, about recognizing when help becomes enabling, about protecting your immediate family while navigating extended family relationships. The blog found an unexpected audience. Hundreds of people shared their own stories: adult children supporting parents who undermined their marriages, siblings funding family members who excluded their kids, people trapped in cycles of financial support that came with strings of disrespect. David read her posts before she published them, offering perspective and sometimes adding his own thoughts about being the family member others found difficult to accept. One post went viral: "When they love your money more than your children." It detailed the signs Rachel had missed, how requests for financial help increased while invitations for genuine connection decreased, how her success made her a target for funding rather than a source of pride, how her children were treated as complications rather than beloved grandchildren. Thousands of people commented, sharing similar experiences. The post was republished by 3 major parenting websites and a financial literacy platform. A literary agent reached out. "Have you considered turning this into a book?" Rachel hadn't, but she discussed it with David that night. "I think people need to hear this," he said. "Not just the story of what happened, but the roadmap for how you changed it. How you set boundaries. How you protected our family while leaving the door open for genuine relationship." Writing the book took 18 months. Rachel interviewed therapists, financial planners, and other families who'd navigated similar situations. She included practical advice about recognizing financial exploitation, setting boundaries, and rebuilding relationships on healthier foundations. Diane and Kenneth read the manuscript before publication. Rachel was nervous about their reaction, but she'd been honest with them that she was writing it. Kenneth called after finishing it. "It's hard to read yourself described as someone who hurt their grandchildren. But it's accurate, and I think other people need to hear it so they don't make the same mistakes. You're sure you're okay with this being public?" "Rachel, if our story helps even one family avoid the pain we caused, then it's worth it. Besides, the ending shows that people can change. That matters too." The book, The Price of Belonging: When Family Love Comes with Conditions, was published the following spring. It struck a chord with readers across different backgrounds: people dealing with financial exploitation, families navigating racial dynamics, anyone struggling with conditional acceptance from relatives. Rachel did readings at bookstores and community centers. At one event, a young mother approached her with tears in her eyes. "My in-laws treat my daughter differently because she has a disability," the woman said. "They shower attention on their other grandchildren but always have excuses when it comes to her. I've been funding their vacations and home renovations, and I just realized I'm paying people to tolerate my child." "What are you going to do?" Rachel asked gently. "What you did. Stop funding it. Demand better. Protect my daughter." These conversations happened everywhere Rachel spoke. The specifics varied: racial discrimination, disability bias, class prejudice, religious differences, but the core pattern was identical. People funding family members who didn't fully accept them or their children. Sophie, now 12, came to one of Rachel's readings and listened to her mother answer questions. Afterward, she said, "Mom, you're helping a lot of people." "I hope so. I'm glad you protected us. Even when it was hard." Rachel hugged her daughter tight. "That's my job, sweetheart. That's always my job." Mia, now 14 and preparing for high school, had become interested in social justice through her mother's work. She started a diversity club at school and often discussed the book's themes with her friends. "My mom wrote about how our grandparents used to treat us," she told her club members during one meeting. "But she also wrote about how they changed. I think that's important, that people can change if they're willing to do the work." Rachel sat in the back of that meeting, watching her daughter facilitate discussions about inclusion and respect, and felt a deep sense of peace. Her children weren't learning to accept less. They were learning to advocate for themselves and others. Bethany started her own real estate business and became financially successful on her own terms. She and Rachel developed a genuine friendship, separate from family obligations. "You know what's funny?" Bethany said during one of their coffee meetings. "I make more money now than when you were supporting our family. Turns out I was capable all along. I just needed the motivation to actually try." I'm proud of you, Rachel said, and meant it. I'm proud of you too. For having the courage to blow up a dysfunctional system. For refusing to let your daughters grow up thinking they deserved less. Kenneth and Diane sold Rachel's book at their church fundraiser, telling anyone who'd listen about how it documented their family's transformation. They'd become advocates for examining unconscious bias, especially racial prejudice in family dynamics. We were those people, Diane told a church group during a discussion. We said we weren't racist, but we treated our mixed-race grandchildren as less important than our other grandchildren. We made excuses based on social comfort and neighborhood expectations. And we were wrong. The honesty was uncomfortable for some listeners, but it opened important conversations. 3 years after Rachel cut off financial support, the family gathered for Thanksgiving at Rachel and David's house, their first time hosting the entire family since the confrontation. The table was crowded with multiple generations. Kenneth and Diane sat next to Mia and Sophie, genuinely engaged in conversations about robotics competitions and dance performances. Bethany's sons asked David about his research, treating him as the respected professor he was. Aunt Emma brought a dish from her own mixed-race family's tradition, making a point of celebrating diverse backgrounds. Before dinner, Kenneth asked if he could say something. 4 years ago, I almost lost my daughter and my grandchildren because I was comfortable with prejudice. Because I valued social ease over human dignity. Because I thought teaching children to accept less was somehow protecting them. He looked at Rachel, David, Mia, and Sophie. This family gave me a gift I didn't deserve, a second chance. Not by making it easy, but by refusing to accept anything less than genuine change. Diane added, we lost a house. We lost financial security. We lost comfortable lives. And we gained something infinitely more valuable, real relationships with all our grandchildren. Authentic family. Bethany stood up. I want to add something. Rachel showed me what real strength looks like. Not enabling bad behavior to keep the peace, but demanding better because you love people enough to want them to grow. Sophie tugged on Rachel's sleeve. Mom, can I say something? Rachel nodded, curious. Sophie stood up, suddenly shy with all eyes on her. I just wanted to say that I love our family. And I'm glad that Grandma and Grandpa learned to love all of us the same. The simplicity of it broke the tension. Diane was crying. Kenneth was crying. Even Bethany wiped her eyes. Mia added, and I want to say that change is possible. Our family proved it. If we can go from eating on the floor to sitting at the same table, other families can change too. After dinner, while the kids played games in the living room, the adults cleaned up together. It was comfortable, genuine, nothing like the strained gatherings of years past. David and Kenneth washed dishes side by side, talking about David's new book project. Diane and Rachel dried and put away, discussing Sophie's upcoming dance showcase. Bethany organized leftovers, making sure everyone was taking food home. This is what family should feel like, Emma commented, watching the scene. Comfortable, inclusive, real. That night, after everyone had gone home and the girls were in bed, Rachel and David sat on their back porch with tea. That was a good day, David said. It was. A really good day. Any regrets about the journey to get here? Rachel thought about the difficult years, the confrontations, the pain of watching her parents struggle financially. She thought about the courage it took to stop enabling behavior that hurt her children. None, she said firmly. Because our daughters are growing up knowing they deserve full respect. They're not learning to make themselves smaller to accommodate other people's prejudices. That's worth everything. David pulled her close. You changed our family's entire trajectory. You know that, right? We did it together. You started it. You had the courage to say enough. To choose our daughters over keeping the peace. Rachel looked through the window at their home. Mia's robotics awards on the mantle, Sophie's dance photos on the wall, a house filled with love and respect and genuine belonging. I think, she said slowly, I finally understand what family is supposed to be. Not people who share DNA and expectations of support, but people who show up for each other with genuine love, who celebrate each other's full humanity, who do the hard work of growth and change, and who pay for their own dinners, David added with a smile. Rachel laughed. Yes, definitely that too. 6 months later, Rachel received an email from a woman who'd read her book. The woman had cut off financial support to family members who excluded her adopted children. The family was angry, but the woman's children were thriving, learning they didn't have to accept conditional love. Thank you for showing me it was possible, the email said. Thank you for choosing your children. Rachel forwarded the email to David with a simple note. This is why we did it. His response came immediately. This is why we'd do it again. Sophie stood in the wings of the Performing Arts Center, adjusting her costume. Tonight was the showcase for advanced dancers, and she'd choreographed her own piece about transformation and belonging. In the audience, both sets of grandparents sat together. Kenneth and Diane, now fully retired and living in a modest apartment they could afford on their pensions. Diane volunteered at a diversity education nonprofit, using her family's story to help others recognize and confront bias. Kenneth mentored mixed-race students at the local college, offering support he wished he'd given his own grandchildren from the beginning. Beside them sat David's parents, who'd flown in from across the country. The two sets of grandparents had become friends over the years, bonded by their shared love for Mia and Sophie and their commitment to being better. Bethany sat with her sons, now teenagers who were genuinely close with their cousins. She'd built a successful real estate business and was dating someone new, a relationship built on mutual respect rather than financial necessity. Rachel and David sat holding hands, watching their youngest daughter prepare to perform. Mia was in the audience too, home from her first year at college where she studied engineering and continued her diversity advocacy work. Sophie's dance began. The piece told a story through movement, exclusion transforming into belonging, separation becoming unity, discord resolving into harmony. It was their family's story, translated into art. When Sophie took her bow, the standing ovation lasted 3 minutes. Kenneth and Diane were on their feet immediately, cheering louder than anyone. David's parents were crying. Bethany was recording on her phone, already planning to share it with extended family. After the performance, Sophie was surrounded by family. Everyone hugged her, congratulated her, told her how proud they were. "That was beautiful, sweetheart," Diane said, holding her granddaughter tight. "Thank you for telling our story." "It's not just our story, Grandma," Sophie said. "It's for anyone who's ever felt like they didn't belong." Later, the extended family went to dinner. Not a fancy restaurant. A casual place where the food was good and the atmosphere was comfortable. The kind of place where mixed families weren't remarkable, where belonging wasn't conditional. At the table, conversation flowed naturally. Kenneth asked Mia about her engineering projects. Diane wanted to hear about Sophie's choreography process. David's parents shared stories about their community's diversity initiatives. Bethany's sons talked about their high school's new inclusion program. Rachel watched it all, marveling at how far they'd come. This was the family she'd hoped for but never had, until she demanded it. David leaned close. "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking about how scared I was 5 years ago. How terrified I was to cut off support, to demand change, to risk losing them entirely. And I'm thinking that it was the best decision I ever made. Because we didn't lose them. We found them, the real them, underneath all the prejudice and entitlement." Mia overheard and joined the conversation. "Mom, I've been meaning to tell you something. I'm using our family's story in my senior thesis. About how economic systems can enable discrimination, and how disrupting those systems can force transformative change." Rachel smiled. "I'd love to read it." "It's because of you," Mia continued. "You showed me that love means protecting people, even when protection looks like conflict. Especially then," Sophie added her voice. "And you showed us that we deserve to be fully loved, not just tolerated. That belonging shouldn't require making ourselves smaller." Kenneth raised his glass. "I want to propose a toast. To Rachel, who loved her children more than she feared confrontation. Who demanded better from all of us and gave us the chance to become the people we should have been all along." Everyone raised their glasses. To Rachel, but Rachel shook her head and raised her own glass. To family. Real family. The kind you build with honesty and boundaries and genuine love. The kind worth fighting for. To family, everyone echoed. As they clinked glasses, Rachel looked around the table. At her husband, who'd quietly endured years of subtle discrimination. At her daughters, who were growing up strong and confident, knowing they deserved full respect. At her parents and sister, who'd done the painful work of genuine change. At extended family who'd learned important lessons about inclusion and respect. This was the family she'd hoped for when she walked into her parents' house 5 years ago and found her daughters eating on the floor. Not the family she'd started with, but the family she'd demanded they become. And it was worth every difficult moment. Sophie started telling a story about dance class, making everyone laugh. Mia jumped in with a related story from college. The conversation flowed naturally, inclusively, with everyone participating equally. David squeezed Rachel's hand under the table. She squeezed back. They'd built this together, by refusing to accept less than full respect and belonging. By protecting their children even when it meant difficult choices. By believing that real change was possible if people were willing to do the work. Looking at her family, messy, imperfect, but genuinely loving, Rachel knew one thing with absolute certainty: she would make the same choice again. Every single time. Because belonging should never come with conditions. Love should never require making yourself smaller. And children should never have to earn the right to be fully seen, fully valued, fully loved. That was the price of belonging, not accepting less, but demanding more. And it was worth every penny she'd stopped giving, every difficult conversation, every moment of uncertainty. Her family had learned what real love looked like. And that lesson was priceless.